If we can restore large-scale damaged ecosystems, why don't we do it?
Welcome to another episode of Rewilding the World with Ben Goldsmith. Sometimes it's said that the environmental and rewilding movement is not ambitious enough. Well, Thijs van der Hoeven here from the Netherlands is working on probably the most ambitious and exciting rewilding idea you've ever heard of. Drawing inspiration from landscape-scale restoration that's taken place in China and elsewhere, Thijs has an idea for restoring, re-wetting, and bringing back the fertility of Sinai, a desert, a dry place with very limited productivity for nature or for people, but which was once one of the breadbaskets of humanity and a place that was teeming with life of all kinds. Thijs, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'm studied in the university in Delft, coastal morphology. That's actually just the sand transport in estuaries and the coastlines, and the typical Dutch thing, of course, because we had to protect our delta. So I started to do that, and then pretty quickly I started to work in Dubai, to work on the Palm Tree Islands. But there I actually learned on big-scale land reclamation projects and everything around it. And got a bit frustrated already because my sister started to work with Greenpeace on the level of destruction and the level of the lack of really doing something back in nature, whatever we wanted to do. And then after I worked for a consultant for 7 years all around the world, I was lucky just to be able to travel around and maybe shape my own opinion on what was happening in the world. I started to work with a Belgian dredging company. So I lived down south in the Netherlands, in Antwerp. Also because I always liked to work with different types of people. And Belgians are pretty different than the Dutch. So it was good to work together with them. And then when I started there, I actually started to focus on waves and winds and the workability of large dredging equipment in the offshore and in the nearshore, which learned me again a lot on the natural systems. And from there, I started to realize that we all created very big numerical models, but lots of the times garbage in is garbage out. So if you don't know what you put in, you cannot really use these models. So from there, I learned a kind of methodology to develop software tools for the people on the boats themselves to learn how to work longer in difficult conditions. And based upon that, I started to become technical manager of some very innovative, complex dredging projects, for which I had to monitor much more than only waves, so groundwater levels, all natural environmental conditions in these projects. And at a certain moment, I realized that the force of nature, and got connected via my sister who was working with Greenpeace, with many people who were working with the aquatic ecosystems. And based upon that, I started to gain some momentum within the dredging company to change a little bit the way how we normally design ports or breakwaters, etc., in a much more natural way. And just when I got a bit of a grip on this new topic, I got a call out of Egypt, and then the whole By the Wheel Sinai project started. And I realized that this destructive industry can be very destructive, but if you change the purpose, it can become a very big, powerful tool to upscale regeneration projects.
So before we talk about more about dredging and about Sinai in particular, you drew inspiration from a landscape recovery project carried out in China in the Loess Plateau. Tell us a little bit about what you know of that.
Yeah, that was actually funny because I was a technical manager of a project down south in the Netherlands. And then at a certain moment, I got this request from Egypt. And I started to work as an engineer, as calculating. And as what I told you, I was a coastal morphologist. So I always have been used to calculate with nature and also to deal with the uncertainties and the inaccuracies of these calculations. And then at a certain moment, this request came and I told my client, I said, listen, I think I can do something that can maybe improve the world a little bit. So give me a bit of space, if that's okay. And they said, that's fine. So it gave me a couple of weeks that I could just dedicate myself to work on the By the Wheel ecosystem development project. So really on using the tides, the natural force to improve water quality and improve the quality of life in this lagoon. and I promised the guy that he could come over on Tuesday nights at my place so we could talk about the project. And at a certain moment, I showed him everything we had been working on. And he became a bit emotional, and he just saw the backlight documentary, in Dutch it's tegenlicht, about the Lustplateau, Green Gold of John Liu. And at that moment, I was really focused on my own work. So I said, guys, listen, thanks, and I will watch the documentary, but whenever I have time. And then my friends and family were taking a bit care of me because I was just all over the place with this project. And then at a certain moment, at night, I put on the documentary and I watched it for 35 times. And it's the regeneration of the Lustplateau in China. And it's, what can I say? For me, it was an inspiration where John Liu at a certain moment says in the documentary, if we can restore large-scale damaged ecosystems, why don't we do it? And I thought, why don't we do it? And I'm working for a dredging company. And when I simplified the efforts they did, it was mainly on retaining moisture. And what they did in the Lustplateau, at that moment, it was the size of Belgium or the Netherlands, or it was a pretty big project, where they actually tried to break the force of rainfall so it could not erode the soils and bring the sediments to the Yellow River, but retain it and make it available for plants to grow.
How did they do that?
Yeah.
How did they go about retaining that moisture in the ground in Lustplateau?
Well, I prepared a couple of documents on the Sinai, and then I got contact with Willem Verda, who contacted me, or who brought me in contact with John Liu. And John Liu said to me, Ties, you have to come over, you have to see the Lustplateau. So I traveled, I think 1 or 2 months later, traveled up to the Lustplateau, and together with John Liu did a trip for 7 days. And first of all, it was mind-blowing because everywhere I went in the world, I only saw destruction. And when I was there, I saw that people were busy with ecological regeneration. And they did that in different phases and in different valleys on different methodologies, because I never forget that they studied for 5 years. And after studying for 5 years, they were more unsure what to do than before they started studying. So Lire actually explained to me is that you have to adaptively start developing methodologies, how you can bring back the natural infrastructure to control the hydrological cycle. So mainly what they have been doing is down in the valleys building retainment walls to keep moisture longer there, and build terraces on which with different indigenous plants going to restore the canopy cover. And the canopy cover is going to improve the organics in the soils, so your retention function of your soil will increase, and via the roots, the water will infiltrate in the soil instead of running down and creating soil erosion. And with that, life comes back pretty quick.
So the lowest plateau was it was nearly desertified, almost incapable of supporting life, and now it's a flourishing, green, productive landscape with trees and small fields and people thriving.
Yep.
Sinai is a whole different proposition, presumably. When I think of Sinai, I think of sand dunes, I think of desert. Describe to me what Sinai may once have been like at the dawn of human civilization.
I think the special thing about the Sinai Peninsula is that she has rather big mountains protecting her old river basin. And if you go into the highlands, the high plateau of the Sinai, because she was all protected by mountains, the riverbeds were not covered by sand. So if you now go to Google Earth, you can see a vast network of old river systems that would capture moisture by the canopy, and the rivers would flow down to the Mediterranean. So if you simply look at the scarps the water created in the land, you can see that there used to be a pretty amazing forest which has to be grown there that could capture the moisture and let it flow down like rivers. So it looks like it had been a 35,000 square kilometer watershed which would flow to the Mediterranean basin. Where in the high plateaus you will mainly have the forest, and down you would have just a beautiful landscape with rivers, some Mediterranean wood forest, and also some savannas, and that's just been a complete, fully functioning ecosystem. With, if you would look at all the paint cavings and all the old historical findings you can still find there. I think there are more than 60,000 cave paintings there used to be a pretty big wildlife also around there.
Like, what kind of wildlife would have been in Sinai, according to those cave paintings?
It's always difficult to find the exact species back, of course, but it has to be most likely. That's also what we see in the Sahara. They would have a kind of a big five. So you would have hippos, giraffes, maybe some big deers, and I don't know exactly what was all there. But if you look at the cave paintings, there were pretty big animals around there. So they would have their own a kind of big five, like what we see in other places in Africa.
And Sinai was a productive landscape for people as well.
Yeah, if you see in the surroundings of the cities, and they're still finding old remarks of cities and tradings and stuff, and also on the fish. If you look back on the history of the fish, what used to be catched in Bardewiel, it's known throughout the whole Mediterranean that the best fish would come from Bardewiel itself. So it has been a very productive land, not only on what the land would produce, but also on the mines and stuff. Sadly enough, for the mines and the copper they would use to find there, they need a lot of wood to mine all the copper from it. So they also burn a lot of their forest to be able there. So it has been the cradle of that society. So it was a very productive land.
And the river system gave onto a big delta, a big wetland towards the Mediterranean coast.
Yep.
What's left of that wetland today?
Yeah, it's sadly we see that all around the world. It's been a Ramsar site. It used to be the biggest bird migration route on the planet. So you actually see it was the highway of birds from Eurasia towards Africa. And sadly enough, in the last thousands of years, those wetlands have been demolished, partly by climate change, partly by salt production, partly by simply just the destruction and the huntings of birds. So currently you see that, I guess there are only like maybe 50 square kilometers of functional wetlands, but they used to be in the hundreds of square kilometers. So if you now look at it, the Bardewiel itself is approximately 600 square kilometers in size. And if you date back a little bit into history, it looks like it used to be 800 to 1,000 square kilometers on vast amounts of wetlands, which of course were the nurseries for all the fish that would swim in this lagoon. And now you can currently see that the lagoon has really been silted up with the eroded soil coming from the desert. And now currently this lagoon is only 1.3 meters deep, where it used to be 20 to 40 meters deep. So you can imagine that there used to be a very productive lagoon on those coastal shores. But also to El Arish and going up to Israel and Palestine, there all used to be vast amounts of wetlands in these coasts.
So the name of the lagoon is Bardewiel.
Yep.
So what we have, to summarize where we've got a once lush mountain range and water catchment, which has been deforested and eroded to the point where it's nearly desertified. And the erosion has resulted in the silting up of this once rich lagoon, yep, which itself is now biologically non-functional. And that's the Sinai that we see today. So along comes a Dutch dredging professional who knows how to bring up sediment from the bottom of the sea to create new islands in Dubai or in the Netherlands, to create new ports and harbors and so on, with a big idea drawn from inspiration derived from landscape restoration projects elsewhere in the world. So what is the big idea? How do you turn Sinai once again into a lush functioning ecosystem from wetland all the way up to the hills?
Well, first of all, exactly what we will do is we still don't know. But we have to learn by doing. But of course, we know the first steps pretty sure. Like, I guess, first of all, the most important thing what we need to realize is currently this lagoon is hypersaline. And it has to do with the fact that it's surrounded by a desert. The desert creates a low pressure on the landscape, so pulls the wind from the Mediterranean and really brings that wind into the Red Sea, so pushes it over the Sinai. And due to those massive wind speeds, the evaporation is really big in this lagoon. So what you see is that the lagoon becomes hypersaline. And one of the first things what we realize together with aquatic people is that the salinity levels are now so high, it's very much reducing the productivity, the primary productivity of this lagoon. The good thing is that the lagoon is due to the fact that the Sinai became a desert thousands of years ago, that she's not that much polluted. So that's a good thing. The problem, though, is the salinity. So the first step is a lagoon normally means that it's a water body connected to the sea. And she's being flushed daily, twice a day, by the tides. So one of the things what we need to focus on in the beginning is creating natural inlets. So you really mimic a tidal inlet from nature, where if the tidal wave propagates along the coast, you capture the tidal wave and you increase the tidal prism, so the volume of water that goes in and out during low and high water. And by doing that, you can dramatically start improving the water quality. And that's then, first of all, mainly looking at salinity and at temperatural differences. Because now you see that in the lagoon, in the winter, it becomes very cold. And in the summer, the water becomes very hot. So lots of the biodiversity of the Mediterranean does not go anymore into this lagoon. So if you increase the tidal flushing, you will reduce salinity and stabilize the temperatures. And by that, you start to create a foundation for large primary productions. Not only that, because at a certain moment you will get nutrient limited. But if you bring in the tides via a natural inlet, where I mean to say not with breakwaters or forced flow in and flow out, but really create spiral flows, I normally used to call it. So they're really 3D flows that entering via the inlet, the lagoon, and they create upwellings. So it actually means it's not only, it has to do with the fact that you create a curved approach channel. So you create upwellings in the lagoons, and they will upwell the subka soils. And the subka soils are the marine sediments, which are pretty salty, but they preserved many of the minerals and nutrients for this aquatic ecosystem to thrive. So by the upwellings, you will resuspend the marine sediments, and then they will be brought by the tidal currents towards your wetlands. And there, during the slack time, so that's the moment the water is on the highest point, the velocities drop to zero, and all the sediments will resettle on the tidal slacks and in the wetlands. And there they will become available for the marshes to grow and for phytoplankton again to be reactivated. And what we see is that the mud flats, they also create a very important remineralization of the water. So they do not only improve the available nutrients, but also will improve the available silica, which are very important for the diatoms to grow in this lagoon. And then if you can improve that primary production, you can start thinking on holistically seeing the whole aquatic food web improving and accelerating in productivity. That's really the first step.
What about the depth of the water? How do you tackle that issue?
Well, that's next from only dredging the lagoons, we're going to restore tidal gullies. So what you have to see it as a room where you open the door so the water can come in, and then you create gullies to reduce the friction of the water to flow and penetrate further into this lagoon. And that's what you do with tidal gullies. And they're really like the meandering tidal gullies, which you normally can beautifully see in estuaries. And again, this is nature that will do it. You will trigger her a bit, but nature will find her own way of lowest resistance, of course. And with those gullies, you can much further penetrate into the lagoon. And then what you will see is that because, of course, it has to be a sustainable project. So as a morphologist, we focus a lot on creating stable inlets. And the stable inlets has to do with the critical flow velocity. And if you are able to design your natural inlet as such that your critical flow velocity is big enough to keep the inlet open, she will start step by step resuspend the sediments into the lagoon. And the resuspension of the sediment means that you're going to naturally deep the lagoon. And that natural deepening of the lagoon will improve the water depth, and in that sense improve your habitats for your bigger fish. But of course, not only that, if you look on the Secchi depth, so it actually means the depth of the water where the solar energy can penetrate in, where it can feed primary production, so the algae. Currently, it's only 1.3 meters deep, as what I said. But we know from the Secchi depths in Egypt, you will have your biggest productivity in a lagoon having her depth from 2 to 4 meters, purely looking at primary production. So also by natural deepening of the lagoon, you will improve the primary production of this lagoon.
And when you do the creation of these inlets and these tidal gullies, you're presumably using dredging equipment. What do you do with the sediment that you're pulling up from the bottom of the wetland?
What I've learned from the Lustplateau, but from many other examples around the world, you got to reuse everything you do. So the moment we start deepening and improving the inlets, lots of sand is being dredged. And this sand will be used on the leeward side of the inlet to create the sand dune valleys again. So this sand will be used to place on the leeward side to trap even more tidal prism to go into the lagoon, and also to naturally protect the coast. Because we want the lagoon to remain there. So the sand we dredge will be used for coastal protection around the lagoon. Then if we go further into the lagoon, we will start dredging these subcat soils. And for these subcat soils, in the beginning, we're going to reuse them as the foundation for the wetlands. So you got to think about just placing a layer of subcat soils in the intertidal area where she can feed plant life again, and also fish or aquatic life. And later on, that's what we're doing together with John Todd, and a famous ecological pioneer from America, where we created a kind of eco-oasis. And that's what we're doing there, is really step by step with using ecological succession, all nature-based, so no additives at all. We're going to desalinate the soils step by step by using the different plant successions. So we start with halophytes, going to salt-tolerant grasses, then going to salt-tolerant vegetables, and step by step going to desalinate the soils by water we produce by big geodesic domes. And the funny thing is, the moment you start desalinating soils, you also flush the nutrients out of the soils. And if you then use that effluent water with salt and the nutrients to feed back into an aquatic train, the algae and the fish can then recycle your nutrients and bring them again back on the soil. So it's a bit, without a picture, a bit difficult to explain, but you got to see that you start with, say, big settlement ponds with the sediments in there. You're going to first grow halophytes. The roots will penetrate the soils and improve the permeability of the soil so you can better flush them. And if you flush the soil, you take out the salt and the nutrients. They go back into the aquatic train where the algae can capture again the nutrients and bring them back as a natural fertilizer, a little bit like aquaponics, to grow your plants. And you do that in different salinity levels. And with it, you can upgrade those salty subcats back again into freshwater, fertile soils.
This episode of Rewilding the World is very kindly brought to you by Uni, that's UNI, the world's first nature-friendly line of luxury body care. We've all heard about the harm that sun cream does to coral reefs, but it's not just sun cream and it's not just coral reefs. Well, Uni makes plastic-free, nature-friendly essentials like shampoo, conditioner, hand wash, and even natural deodorant, all full of nourishing ingredients such as seaweed kelp, aloe vera, and olive oil. We've been loving our Uni products, but don't take it from me. Here's my wife, Jemima.
Yes, I really love them. They're such clean and nourishing products. The microalgae body oil is so good and really smells amazing.
You can find Uni products at Space NK or at weareuni.com. So you paint a very beautiful picture of effectively a wetland being brought back to life with some engineering and the restoration of natural processes, natural flow of water and natural biological processes. What about the surrounding watershed? How does your project envisage restoring the soils and the canopy and the ecological health of further upstream around the hills?
Yeah, you got to realize that aquatic ecosystems are recovered much quicker than land ecosystems. So what we see, we created with many supportive people a regenerative fish catch methodology. So how actually the fishermen know which fish, what they need to catch to actually enable ecological growth. So that's the first thing. And that's a very important thing because by doing it, the predictions go up that we can 10 times or even more increase the fish catch in this lagoon by dredging these gullies and these inlets. And with it, you create a future perspective for the people living there, and you create natural capital. Now, after that, what we will do is, and we're now creating this first pilot, and we do that here in the laboratory in the Netherlands, that with those marine sediments, you can start producing food, because the ecological succession treatment I told you are productive and food productive things we produce. So by improving those soils, we will grow a very diverse food pattern for the people that live there. And that will all evaporate water. And then what we're going to do is look onto the right spots within that desert where the moisture of the Mediterranean is being brought during the day, where we can start creating old fog forests and creating with fog nets and with all the available tools that are there and many ancient ways or ancient methodologies to produce water in the desert, because there are a lot from the old days. There is what we see is where we start to regenerate an indigenous forest. And that mainly indigenous, of course, is that we're not only using the indigenous soils, but we're going to look for in the surroundings, for example, in Lebanon and in other areas close by, what type of canopy can grow there and what type of canopy we can use to create soil coverage by the leaves. So there's always a bit of a combination where you have to search for to protect the soils you're growing, and to grow the canopy that is most likely has the biggest survival rate of living in these areas. And then if you look at the map, you will find Mount Megara, which is approximately 100 kilometers by road from Bardawil inland. And there we reach for the first time mountains above the 700 meters. And based upon the support of Mian, we knew that the first cloud condensation level in the Mediterranean basin is approximately around 700 meters. So what we're searching for the spot where we're going to restore the canopy, where we can directly already like 30 to 40 days a year have clouds, where the clouds can be harvested and support the increase of the canopy growth. So you're finding the right spots where to do it.
And those trees will themselves create a cycle of cloud harvesting. So once they're established, they then begin to harvest the water themselves, and you create a self-fulfilling cycle of cloud harvesting and water flowing through the catchment.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Thijs, how are you going to make all this happen? Like, what's the nature of your conversation with the Egyptian government and other interested parties? You know, where is this project at, and how do you make it a reality?
Yeah, the last question is the search for the last 6 years, but. I guess what happened is I grew up in the dredging industry, so I can talk a little bit their language. So that was the first support we had 6 years ago. And then we started to realize that by doing such a large-scale ecological regeneration project, it makes sense that all the material we have to dredge for the aquatic life, we can reuse it as indigenous soils. We can vastly upscale these works. So what happened, like 2019, we came in direct contact with the president of Egypt, and he was very, very interested to support this project. But then, of course, you had to go into negotiations and etc. So that took a bit of a while. And then, sadly enough, this strange geopolitical world we live in created this weird war in the Ukraine. And then Egypt did not have money at that moment, mainly not foreign currency. So then we were almost there to start, and then it stopped again. But we have been discussing with them also the potential of Europe and other countries or continents in the world that willing to support these projects. And then in the COP last November, all of a sudden it went very quickly. We signed the cooperation agreement together with SCA, so that's Suez Canal Authority, to set up a PPP project. So really that we can, together with them, search for international support. Not only on money, but also on knowledge and on other support Europe could give, for example, to Northern Africa. And that's where we currently are. So we just delivered all the documents towards Egypt of the first phase. And I'm now in pretty far discussions with the Dutch government to start supporting this project. And we have the Belgium, we have the France, and we have the Spanish also interested to start investing in these projects. Because if you look at it, ecological regeneration can give us a lot. it can, first of all, build a brotherhood between North Africa and Europe. So not anymore like how development aid used to be, but much more a shared future. And lots of the destructive industry, as well as the oil industry, but the dredging industry and many of these industries, if you change their purpose, they can become very powerful tools to support local communities by regeneration of the land. And that's where we currently are. So we now delivered all the documents, and on the given another 2 weeks, I will travel most likely up to Egypt to do the first tactical kickoff meeting of the first project. They have been dredging there already from the last 2 years. So we are going to support them with their dredging works on the ecological succession. And we're going together to seek for the fundings for this project to really scale it up to the early works, which hopefully, and I'm always positive, but you need to be that in these type of projects, that we can start the real work in June.
Tees, how much money is it going to cost to do a proper job restoring Sinai?
Yeah, I always have to be careful by answering these questions, but normally out of the first rough lines calculations we did, it's approximately 70 to 100 billion euros you need. But realize if you look at the cash flow, you really think about 30 to 40 billion, because the productivity of this land in combination with the aquatic life is just tremendous how quickly she can start bringing money back. As we speak, I set up a partnership with fishing companies to show them that if you all step into this regenerative approach, you can really start thinking of regenerative fish catch. So there are many, many things. It can really flip the current society and the current economy.
Tees, that's incredibly exciting. The Sinai Peninsula is an example of about as complete ecological desecration as can be imagined. A desert which was once a thriving wetland, a productive farmed landscape, tree canopy up into the hills and mountains capable of harvesting water from clouds, and it's all gone. If we can restore that based upon the ideas that you've brought from the dredging industry and from other ecological restoration projects around the world, then really we can restore anywhere. So this is a project that people should have their eyes on, and I'm enormously excited, and I'm so grateful to you, Tees, for taking the time to talk to us about it. Good luck.
Thanks.
Tees is exactly the kind of ecological restoration visionary that the world needs to support if we're going to restore nature on the scale that we need to in the coming years. That really is an extraordinary story we've just heard from Tees. If you want to learn more about it, visit the website of Commonland, the organization we discussed, whose whole existence is about large-scale landscape restoration. Well, that's it for this, our first season of Rewilding the World. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed it, please do visit whatever platform you use to listen to these and give us a positive rating and a positive review. Spread the word among your friends, and we will be back. So make sure you're subscribed so you get notified when we come out with our second season. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've loved it as much as I have.
You already know that this isn't about one species. It's about systems, interdependence, collapse. And yet, wild salmon, one of the clearest indicators we have, are vanishing fast. Their decline signals something deeper, something more dangerous. I'm Jim Murray. I host The Last Salmon. It's not a side story. It's the biodiversity story that everyone like you should be listening to. Season 2's out now.
One of the best ways to support rewilding is to go and visit rewilding projects on the ground. My friends at the European Nature Trust have asked me to tell you about the series of coexistence adventures that they've put together. They're designed to give you the best chance of seeing Europe's most iconic species: bears, wolves, lynx, and so on. All of these are on the rise in Europe because of rewilding projects. These trips are hosted by expert guides and conservationists, and most importantly, the European Nature Trust is giving half of the revenues directly to the foundations working on the ground to restore wildlife. I'd love you to check out these coexistence adventures at the European Nature Trust website.